hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm another invasive Californian. Can't hear it in my voice. This is my fourth time in Portland this year after like not ever having been here prior to like March 2019. It's been really nice to find a really beautiful literary city with a great community, so it's great to be back here. And if my rent goes up, I might move here along with Lydia. So. I'm going to read from an essay that came out on LitHub or this past September in conjunction with the Freeman's Journal, the newest issue of Freeman's Journal. It's on California, so I'm reading an essay about California. I live in Oakland right now, but I'm from LA, from South LA, which used to be called South Central Los Angeles, which, you know, all kinds of terrible ideas are kind of attached to that name of South Central Los Angeles. So I wrote this essay thinking about what kinds of ideas come with like just saying the name South Central Los Angeles. It's in part about my grandmother's migration there from Louisiana during World War II. So I'm going to read around from that essay, and it's non-linear, so I'll just like pick out some chunks that are fun. So my maternal grandmother, Olivia Duffy, never intended to live in Los Angeles. Her arrival in the city was the result of a merciful instance of Deus Ex Machina, a high school graduate without the means to attend a college in her home state of Louisiana, but who had heard stories of Black communities flourishing in Oakland, California. She joined a childhood friend in stuffing her belongings into the back of a car. They drove west from Oakdale in the summer of 1945, but their timing was off. The journey ended up being belated, and by the time they crossed into California, America had dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The tragedies on the other side of the Pacific signaled not only the end of the war, but also the wartime economy that had drawn so many Black people to work in Oakland's shipyards, where they became crucial elements of the American war effort, and in the process transformed Oakland into a stronghold of African American political activism and culture. None of that mattered for my grandmother. Olivia and her friend had been taking their time nearly 400 miles south of Oakland, driving down Abercrombie Boulevard in Venice Beach. Who knows why they chose to dawdle? Maybe they took news of the war's end as the end of their dreams in Oakland. Maybe they were simply allowing themselves to delight in the low-slung bohemian charm and creeping decrepitude of that bizarre neighborhood. But suddenly they felt hesitant about continuing on to Oakland. Luckily, the car made the choice for them. Before long, its engine began to wheeze. They became Angelinos by happenstance. Olivia settled into a Venice boarding house while working as a caretaker. Eventually, she'd saved up enough money to purchase a bungalow on Broadway Street at the center of Oakwood, Venice Beach's Black enclave. Her mother got tired of Jim Crow and followed her daughter to Los Angeles, taking up residence in the Broadway bungalow. It was there that Olivia made her life, not Oakland. There that she built a business offering caretaking services to local elderly people. There that she gave birth to 5 daughters. There that she married men when she was in love with them. And there that she divorced them when she tired of them. It was in LA that my grandmother, seeking a freedom that she couldn't imagine in Jim Crow, Louisiana, decided to make a home. Olivia eventually moved her family out of the West Side to the South LA community of Vermont Square. And it's in South LA that my family has resided for the majority of its time in California. Venice still possesses a nostalgic appeal for my family, though, as the neighborhood where our history in California begins. It's part of our origin story. Sorry, that was terrible. Which I probably recite to anyone who will listen. I got the habit from my mother, who would tell me stories of what it was like to grow up in the West Side in the 50s and 60s, when Venice was dubbed the slum by the sea, and the neighborhood attracted a motley assortment of Black and Latino immigrants, European immigrants, and poor artists. She talked about worshiping at Friendship Baptist Church, down the block from Olivia's bungalow, back when the church could draw more than a dozen worshipers, about barbecues at the park on Oakwood Avenue, and learning to play domino with her grandmother at the park's long tables, about rollerblading over to the beach and attending school at Westminster Elementary, where most of her classmates were Black. My mom would tell these stories of a woman possessed by the memory of a lifestyle in danger of wafting away on an ocean breeze. Her memory elided a sobering fact about the social history that created Oakwood, though. Oakwood, like many Black communities in LA, was in part a product of racially restrictive housing covenants that prohibited Black people from living in certain parts of the city. In Venice's heyday as a resort destination, Blacks were forbidden from owning property near the beach. Fearing violence if they dared to transgress against the city's de facto segregation, Black migrants in Venice settled slightly inland, creating a community similar to the Black ghetto that had coalesced around Central Avenue, just south of downtown LA. They named their community Oakwood, but white residents had another name for the district, Ghost Town, a presence that was, for all intents and purposes, in absence. I forgot to say the title was A Live Up Gave It is Walking with the Ghost of Black Los Angeles, which I did not approve of. If you want to find it, it's on there. I called it Black LA is Nowhere. People tend to speak of South Central LA as a homogeneous neighborhood, an undifferentiated community of black people racked by poverty, gang violence, drug use, and general social disorder. In actuality, South Central is not a neighborhood at all, but a massive swath of the city settled by Black migrants in the 20th century. It's a radically horizontal post-industrial landscape where buildings almost never exceed 1 or 2 stories, and shelter from the sun is rare. Down Slauson Avenue, decommissioned train tracks that once carried freight from the port to the inner city are a sign of the region's formerly robust economy. Surrealist sites crowd the streets, men dressed as the Hebrews they believe themselves to be, the inordinate number of storefront churches lining the streets of any community, wealthier in hope than capital, music video shoots depicting absurd extravagance while obscene poverty lingers just outside the frame, Nation of Islam adherents dressed in gray suits while hawking newspapers in 100-degree heat. Looking up from the basin that South Central occupies, one's eye makes out the opulence of hillside communities in the north and south, the beauty of the San Gabriel Mountains rising to their snowy peaks. It is an impossible land, a land of preposterous contrast. The region's bounds expand and contract depending on who you ask. For some, it might include only neighborhoods within LA proper, bound by the 10 freeway on the north, the 105 to the south, and La Brea to the west, a region that spans from the Tony mansions of West Adams in the northwest to poverty-stricken blocks of Watts in the southeast. Practically, South Central might also include cities that are technically separate from LA, but feel contiguous. It's hard for me to imagine a definition of South Central that doesn't include the cities of Inglewood and Compton, where many of my aunts, uncles, and cousins lived before leaving the city. The name South Central itself is rather meaningless. It refers to the historically Black district just south of downtown LA, anchored by Central Avenue. As new migrants arrived, affluent Black Angelenos pushed their way westward, gradually expanding the bounds of South Central until it included areas nowhere near Central Avenue. South Central became a catch-all term for anywhere Black bodies were found, anywhere that white people did not want to be. South Central is a rhetorical ghost town. It's a synonym not only for Black LA, but the inner city blight that overtook Black communities in the late 20th century. In common parlance, South Central is a synonym for Black, for undesirability, for occluded possibility, for the end of prosperity. Today, South Central functions as a ghost town, an absence rather than a presence. Beneath that sign lies the reality. South Central is an imbricated set of communities where commonality begins and ends in their Blackness, or at this point, the memory of the Black people who once called those neighborhoods their homes, and the culture that they gave rise to. It's a space of stunning social and economic heterogeneity, where the worst effects of the Reagan years coincide with the disaster of the 80s. I grew up in Windsor Hills, an unincorporated community in southwest LA County. between Inglewood to the south and Culver City to the west. Perched above South Central's post-industrial flatlands, Windsor Hills was something of an anomaly in the 90s and 2000s. A cluster of middle-class black prosperity nestled among communities that outsiders thought of as cesspools of poverty and violence. The locals call it Black Beverly Hills. There's actually a sign, if you drive up Blueberry Avenue, there's a sign that says Black Beverly Hills that people put up above the freeway sign. And even as a child, I perceived the neighborhood's unlikeliness. A certain unreality draped itself over our green lawns and two-car garages. If Windsor Hills was all you knew about South Central, you might think that the last 30 years of American history had never happened. It provided us with a reason for optimism, an exception to the despair that reigned just to the south and north. For most of my youth, Windsor Hills was all I knew about South Central. My life was in pointed contrast to those of my aunts and cousins who lived just down the hill in Crenshaw. It was a youth spent with both my parents in our nicely appointed 4-bedroom home, where gaudy Rococo furniture carved out of polished wood held a loft bust of imagined African royalty, and portraits of black political heroes, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, lined the walls. I had my own bedroom, a bedroom bigger than some people's kitchens, with a window that looked out west over Culver City. I woke up to the sight of palm trees swaying in the morning wind. My mother shepherded my brother Isaiah and I to school in her roomy sedan, then picked us up in the afternoon so that we could complete our homework under her stern supervision, without the distractions that my older cousins fell prone to on South Central's wide tree-lined boulevards. I would never fall prey to gun violence, or a police officer with an axe to grind on a black youth, or a drug dealer attempting to make a bit of money. Instead, every night I ate a homemade dinner, some variation on a soul food recipe that my mom inherited from her mother, then finished the night reading next to my younger brother in our spacious living room, where framed portraits of black historical luminaries like Rosa Parks and Malcolm X lined the walls. What is there to say about my mom? Her life encompasses South Central's extremes. She grew up in poverty in Vermont Square in Crenshaw after the Watts riots, then opened up a string of businesses that eventually earned her enough money to achieve that oldest of LA dreams, buying property. At the age of 35, she had ascended from the city's flatlands to Windsor Hills. Her trajectory meant that she knew how easily a black life in LA could veer into tragedy, how simple it was to be introduced to heroin or crack at a party, how simply one crossed the threshold into the walking death of addiction, how rare it was for an addict to retrace their steps back across that same threshold. I think that she, and by extension I, believed that a healthy fear of South Central's deprivations would keep her from being entangled in them. Fear imprinted itself on her mind, and despite her best efforts, she would transmit that fear to us. When I didn't do my homework, she chastised me with the examples of the addicts who ambled up and down Florence or Slauson Avenue. Once when I was 10, she caught me playing a video game instead of doing my math homework, a sure sign that I was headed to prison or worse. The next morning, she woke my brother and I up early and took us cruising down Slauson, pointing out the homeless who ambled alongside the avenue's defunct railroad tracks. Do you want to be like them? She asked me. Keep messing around and that's what'll happen. I never forgot the image of one woman who dug around in a dumpster outside a grimy fast food restaurant. With one hand, she tossed the useless trash into the street and separated the valuable recyclables into a grocery cart that she held steady with the other hand. My mom came to a stop at a red light, and suddenly the woman and I were parallel to one another. Sensing an audience, she glanced up. We made eye contact through the window, and her hazy brown eyes transmitted something to me, a mix of fear, shame, and anger. I remember shuddering in receipt. In South LA, we were always wallowing in this melange, breathing it in, imbibing it with our mother's milk. Thank you.